2 years had passed since Marcus first entered the arena. The Galactic Coalition had undergone changes that no one could have predicted. What had started as a single moment of understanding between a human and a feared beast had transformed into a movement that was reshaping civilization itself. Across the galaxy, species that had spent millennia viewing each other with suspicion and fear were beginning to work together in ways that had never been possible before. The changes were not always easy or quick. There was still resistance. There were still species and individuals who clung to the old ways of thinking. But the tide had shifted. The evidence was becoming too strong to ignore. Every time a human advisor worked with a different species, the results were measurable and positive. Military units trained using Marcus's methods showed better cohesion and performed their duties with greater effectiveness. Diplomatic teams that included human members were achieving peaceful resolutions to conflicts that had seemed impossible to solve. Scientific research teams that partnered with humans made discoveries faster than they had ever made them before. Vincent received a communication one morning that changed everything again. It came from the Zalon homeworld, from the High Council of War. The message was simple, but its implications were enormous. The Zalon had made a decision. They wanted to establish a new position in the coalition government. They wanted to create the office of Ambassador of Peace. They wanted to offer this position to a human. They wanted to offer it to Marcus. Marcus was on Cordis Prime when the message arrived. He was teaching a new class of cadets, helping them understand the principles of connection and recognition. When Vincent told him about the offer, Marcus sat in silence for a long time before responding. "I am not a politician," Marcus said finally. "I am not a diplomat. I am someone who learned to see a creature that others feared and to recognize it as valuable. I do not know if I can do that on a governmental scale. Neither did I think you could do it in an arena." Vincent replied, "But you did. You changed the world by being yourself, by being honest, and by refusing to accept that fear and dominance were the only ways to interact with others. The coalition needs that now more than ever. We need someone who can hold that vision and help governments and species remember that there is a better way." Marcus accepted the position. A week later, he left Cordis Prime and traveled to the seat of the Galactic Coalition government on Viridian Prime. The ceremony to install him as Ambassador of Peace was unlike anything the Coalition had ever witnessed. Representatives from every known species in the galaxy gathered to acknowledge this moment. The Zalon general who had once demanded answers when his cadet was killed in the arena stood beside Marcus and publicly stated that humanity's gift to the galaxy was not strength, but wisdom. The Rex scientist presented data showing that societies that incorporated human methods of understanding experienced measurable increases in stability and progress. The Kreth ambassador announced that the Kreth Empire was permanently dissolving its military conquest policies in favor of peaceful cooperation and trade. But the most symbolic moment came when Reka, the Snarl beast, was brought to the ceremony. The creature traveled in a specially designed transport that allowed it to remain comfortable during the journey. When Reka emerged at the ceremony, there was a moment of hesitation from many of the representatives. This creature had been feared for so long. But then Marcus walked forward and placed his hand on the beast's neck, and everyone in the gathering understood. This was not just a ceremony for a human. This was a ceremony for what humans had taught the galaxy. It was a ceremony for the possibility of transformation. It was a ceremony for recognition. Over the following months, Marcus traveled to every major planet in the Coalition. He met with government leaders, military commanders, and ordinary citizens. He did not give speeches or make grand promises. Instead, he simply shared stories. He told the story of Reka. He told the story of his childhood on Earth with the abused horse. He told stories of human history, of how humans had learned to live with other creatures and with each other despite their differences. He told stories of connection and understanding. Everywhere Marcus went, something shifted. Not dramatically or suddenly, but gradually and genuinely. Species began to see each other differently. They began to understand that the other was not an enemy to be feared, but a potential partner to be understood. Trade agreements flourished. Scientific collaborations expanded. Cultural exchanges increased. Young cadets from different species began to form genuine friendships instead of competitive rivalries. 2 years into Marcus's tenure as Ambassador of Peace, something remarkable happened. A conflict that had been brewing between two minor species on the edge of Coalition space came to the brink of war. The two species, the Threll and the Korvac, had been disputing over territorial rights for decades. Neither side would back down. Neither side could see any value in the other. The traditional diplomatic routes had failed. War seemed inevitable. Marcus traveled to the disputed region with a small team. He requested a meeting with the leaders of both species. The meeting took place in a neutral location, on a small moon that belonged to neither party. The Threll commander arrived first, along with his military advisors. The Korvac leader arrived later, accompanied by her strategic officers. They sat across from each other with visible hostility and distrust. Marcus did not begin with negotiations or debate. Instead, he asked them a simple question. "Tell me about yourselves," he said. "Not about your claims to the territory. Not about your military strength. Tell me about who you are as beings. Tell me about what your species values. Tell me about what you have lost and what you hope to gain." The Threll commander was initially resistant. He had come expecting confrontation and debate. Instead, he found himself being asked to reveal something personal and genuine. After a moment of hesitation, he began to speak. He spoke about his people's history of displacement. He spoke about the fear that if they lost this territory, they would lose everything. He spoke about the grief that came from feeling invisible and unvalued in the galaxy. The Korvac leader listened to this. When it came her turn to speak, she revealed something similar. Her people had also experienced displacement. They too felt threatened and afraid. They too wanted to be seen and valued. As the two leaders spoke, something began to happen. They started to see each other not as enemies or rivals, but as beings who had experienced similar suffering. The conflict was not really about territory at all. It was about fear and the need to be recognized as important and valuable. By the end of the conversation, the two leaders had not solved the territorial dispute, but they had begun to see a path forward that did not involve war. They began to discuss ways to share the territory, to cooperate rather than compete, to use the resources together in a way that would benefit both species. 3 months later, the two species signed an agreement of cooperation that became a model for how other conflicts in the coalition could be resolved. Instead of fighting over resources, species began to pool resources. Instead of viewing each other as competitors, they began to view each other as partners. The dispute that should have become a war became the beginning of a new alliance. Vincent received news of this development while he was meeting with the Coalition Council. When he heard the details, he understood that something fundamental had shifted. Marcus had not solved the conflict by imposing a solution or using political power. Marcus had solved it by helping the two species recognize each other's pain and value. He had done what humans had always done best. He had helped others see the truth about themselves and about each other. That evening, Vincent sent a message to Marcus. The message was brief. It simply said, "You have done it again. You have shown the galaxy that understanding is more powerful than anything else." Marcus was on a spacecraft traveling between worlds when he received the message. He was looking out at the stars, at the vast expanse of space that humanity had only recently begun to explore. He thought about how far his species had come. He thought about how humans had started on a single planet, learning to live with the creatures around them, learning to understand each other despite their differences. Now that same gift was helping an entire galaxy learn to do the same. Rekka was with him on the ship. The beast spent much of its time sleeping now, content and at peace. The creature that had once been called the Snarled beast, the death beast that had never bowed to anyone, was now a symbol of hope and transformation across 1,000 worlds. Marcus reached out and stroked Rekka's scales gently. The beast opened its eyes and made that familiar sound, the one that meant recognition and connection. In that moment, Marcus understood the true meaning of what had begun in that arena 2 years ago. It was not about winning or losing. It was not about dominance or submission. It was about the simple and profound act of seeing another being, truly seeing them and helping them know that they mattered, that they were valued, that they were worthy of respect and recognition. And in teaching the galaxy this lesson, humanity had found its true place among the stars. 1 year had passed since Marcus walked into the arena. The Galactic Military Academy on Cortus Prime had transformed completely. The building that had once been a place of fear and dominance had become a place of learning and understanding. The Snarl beast, which had once been confined to the arena as a test of survival, now roamed freely on a protected reserve set aside specifically for its care and well-being. Marcus stood in that reserve on an early morning, watching the beast move across the red sand. The creature was no longer referred to by its old name. The Academy had given it a proper name, chosen by Marcus himself. It was called Reka, which meant the Awakened One in an ancient human language from Earth. Reka moved with confidence and peace. Its black scales caught the morning light. Its breathing was calm and steady. This was no longer a weapon or a test. This was a conscious being living with dignity and choice. Marcus had not remained a simple cadet. He had been promoted to instructor within the Academy. His job was to teach other cadets from every species imaginable what he had learned about connection and understanding. The classes were always full. Every cadet wanted to learn from Marcus. They wanted to know how to do what he had done. They wanted to understand how to reach something inside another being that could transform fear into recognition. Vincent arrived at the reserve just as the sun was fully clearing the horizon. He had made the journey from Viridian Prime specifically to witness this day. Today was the one-year anniversary of Marcus's trial. Today was the day that the Academy had chosen to honor what had happened by creating a new tradition. "Are you ready?" Vincent asked as he approached Marcus and Reka. "I am," Marcus said. "The cadets are assembled in the observation area. Everyone who wanted to witness this is here." "From how many species?" Vincent asked. 47, Marcus said. "They came from across the galaxy. Some had to travel for months to be here. They all wanted to see this moment." Together they walked toward the center of the reserve where a large viewing platform had been constructed. Below them, the arena that had once been used as a test ground had been completely redesigned. It was no longer a place of combat. It was now a place of ceremony. The sand had been raked smooth. Symbols from every known species had been marked into the ground in a large circle. In the center of the circle stood an empty space waiting. Marcus and Reka moved into that center space together. The beast walked beside Marcus, not ahead and not behind, but beside him as an equal. The cadets in the observation area went completely silent. What they were witnessing was the opposite of what had happened 1 year ago. This was not a trial. This was not a test. This was a demonstration of something that had never existed before in the history of the Academy. Vincent stood at the highest point of the observation platform with Commander Sarah Norton and representatives from the Zalon, Vrex, and Kreth species. These 3 species had been the first to see the value in what Marcus had shown them. They had become the strongest advocates for humanity's role in the Coalition. "This will become the new standard for all cadet training," Commander Sarah said. "Not physical tests of dominance, but demonstrations of connection. Not measuring who is strongest, but measuring who can build the strongest relationships." The military academies of 17 other species have already adopted similar programs, the Zalon general added. They are calling them the Marcus method. They are teaching their cadets that understanding can be stronger than weapons. "This is what true evolution looks like," the Vrex scientist said, his large eyes reflecting the scene below. "Not improvement in physical form or technological capability, but improvement in the ability to recognize the value in other beings. This is remarkable." In the center of the arena, Marcus placed his hand on Reka's neck. The beast made that same sound that had shocked everyone 1 year ago. The sound that was not quite a roar and not quite a purr. It was a sound of contentment and recognition. The cadets watching from above began to understand something profound. This was what strength looked like when it was combined with compassion. This was what power looked like when it was not used for dominance but for connection. A young Kreth cadet who had been training with Marcus for several months stepped forward. Her name was Voss, and she was one of thousands of cadets from every species who had come to the Academy to learn what Marcus had to teach. Voss walked slowly down into the arena. She moved with the same calm confidence that Marcus had shown 1 year ago. "I'm going to attempt what Marcus accomplished," Voss announced, her voice carrying through the observation area. "I am going to demonstrate that connection is not unique to humans. Connection is something that all species can learn. All beings can learn to see other beings as valuable." Voss approached Reka. The beast turned to face her. The creature's eyes were intelligent and aware. Voss stood before the beast without weapons, without armor, without any protection except her own presence. She spoke to the creature not in demanding tones but in the same gentle voice that Marcus used. "I see you," Voss said. "I see that you are more than just a beast. I see that you have intelligence and feeling. I see that you deserve respect and recognition. Reka circled Voss slowly, just as it had circled Marcus 1 year ago. But this time the circle was different. The beast was testing this new connection, understanding that there was more than one being in the galaxy who could offer this kind of recognition. After the third circle, Reka lowered its head to Voss just as it had done for Marcus. The observation area erupted in response. Not in cheers or celebrations that would have been disruptive, but in acknowledgement, in understanding, in recognition that something important had just happened again. Over the next several hours, cadet after cadet from different species entered the arena to attempt the same connection with Reka. Not all of them succeeded on their first try. Some needed multiple attempts. Some would need to come back and try again. But that was the point. This was not meant to be easy. This was meant to be a journey of learning and growth. By the end of the day, 12 cadets from 11 different species had successfully made the connection with Reka. The beast had bowed to each of them. The creature had recognized each of them as beings worthy of that recognition. As the sun set over Cordus Prime, Vincent stood alone with Marcus and Reka in the now empty arena. "Do you know what you have created?" Vincent asked Marcus. "I did not create it alone," Marcus said. "The beast created it with me. The Academy created it by being willing to change. All the species created it by being willing to learn something different." "You have created hope," Vincent said simply. "For the first time in the history of the Galactic Coalition, there is real hope that different species can live together not through treaties and agreements, but through genuine understanding and respect." Reka nuzzled Marcus's shoulder gently. The beast had become a symbol of transformation. It had become a symbol of what was possible when beings chose connection over conflict. The Academy had renamed the entire training program. It was no longer called the Trial of the Snarl Beast, it was now called the Trial of Recognition. The purpose was no longer to test who was strong enough to survive. The purpose was now to teach every cadet that true strength came from the ability to see and honor the value in every living being. As darkness fell across the desert and stars began to appear in the sky above, Marcus, Reka, and Vincent stood together in the center of the arena. Around them were the symbols of every species in the coalition, marking the circle where a new era had begun. The message had spread across 1,000 worlds. It had traveled through every military academy and every government building. It had reached every being in the galaxy. The message was simple but profound. Humanity had not come to the stars to conquer or to dominate. Humanity had come to teach a lesson that no other species had learned. Humanity had come to show that the greatest power was not the power to destroy, but the power to recognize and value the light that existed in every conscious being. The Snarl Beast no longer snarled. The Death Beast had become the Awakened Beast, and in becoming that, it had helped awaken something in the entire galaxy. It had helped awaken the understanding that there was a better way. There had always been a better way. It had just taken a human named Marcus and a creature named Reka to show it to the stars. 3 months had passed since Marcus walked into the arena. In that time, the story of what happened had spread across the entire Galactic Coalition. It had moved from Academy records to military briefings to news broadcasts, watched by billions of beings across 1,000 worlds. The Snarl Beast had bowed to a human. The impossible had become real. The Academy had changed dramatically in those 3 months. New requests were coming in constantly. Species that had never shown interest in human cadets before were now specifically asking for them. The Zalon general, whose cadet had died in the same arena, had requested a private meeting with Marcus. During that meeting, the general had asked for human military advisors to help train his troops. He had said that perhaps there was more to victory than pure strength. Perhaps there was more to leadership than dominance. The Vrex scientists had established a research program specifically to study human behavior and human problem-solving methods. They had discovered something that surprised them. Humans, despite being physically weaker and technologically less advanced than most galactic species, possessed something unique. Humans could read emotions in other beings. Humans could understand suffering. Humans could connect across different species barriers in ways that the Vrex's superior intellect had never achieved. The Kreth ambassador had returned to her homeworld and presented a proposal to her government. She suggested that the Kreth needed human advisors not just for military matters, but for diplomatic relationships. The Kreth, she argued, had built their civilization on strength and independence. But strength alone had never brought lasting peace. Perhaps it was time to try something different. Perhaps it was time to learn from a species that understood that true strength could include compassion. Captain Vincent Hayes had been promoted. He was no longer simply an instructor at the academy. He had been given a new title and a new mission. He was now the director of human integration programs for the Galactic Coalition. His job was to identify the unique abilities that humans possessed and to help other species learn from them. He traveled to worlds across the galaxy, meeting with government leaders and military commanders. Everywhere he went, they asked the same question: how do we learn what humans know? How do we teach our people to do what Marcus did? Vincent always gave the same answer: you cannot teach it from books. You cannot learn it from technology. It comes from a different kind of experience. It comes from having lived as a human, from having evolved as humans have evolved, from having learned to understand other living things through thousands of generations of survival and cooperation. One day, Vincent received a visitor in his new office. The office was on the planet Viridian Prime in the largest city in the galaxy. Through his window, he could see thousands of ships arriving and departing. Representatives from every known species moved through the streets below. It was a symbol of the Coalition, a place where all beings were supposed to be equal. The visitor was Sarah, the Academy commander. She had requested a private meeting, and Vincent had agreed immediately. "I have been reviewing the data," Sarah said as she entered the office. "Since Marcus completed the trial, we have had 3,000 human cadets join the Academy." 3,000. Before the trial, we had 50. Do you understand what this means? It means humans are beginning to see themselves differently, Vincent said. They are beginning to understand that their place in the galaxy is not as warriors or followers, but as something else. It means the balance of power is shifting, Sarah said directly. Other species are beginning to depend on humans for skills they do not possess. The Zalon depend on humans for wisdom about strategy. The Vrex depend on humans for understanding about society and relationships. The Kreth depend on humans for advice about cooperation and peace. This is unprecedented. This is dangerous. Dangerous how? Vincent asked. Because power always creates resistance, Sarah said. There are species in the Coalition that see what is happening and they are afraid. They are afraid that humanity will rise too quickly. They are afraid of losing their own influence. There are already meetings happening in secret. There are already species discussing how to limit human influence, how to restrict human access to certain technologies, how to ensure that humans do not become too important to the Coalition. Vincent listened to this information carefully. He had suspected something like this might happen. When one group suddenly gained influence or respect, others often became threatened. This was true of individuals, and it was true of entire species. What do you suggest? Vincent asked. I suggest that you are very careful, Sarah said. I suggest that you move slowly and thoughtfully. I suggest that you do not push too hard or too fast. Give other species time to adjust to this new reality. Let them come to the conclusion themselves that humans have value. Do not force it upon them. After Sarah left, Vincent stood at his window and looked out over the city. He thought about Marcus. He thought about what that young human cadet had done in the arena. Marcus had not forced anything. He had not tried to control the Snarled beast. He had simply offered understanding and recognition. The beast had responded to that because it was genuine. It was not a technique or a strategy. It was simply honesty and compassion. That night, Vincent sent a message to every human representative in the Coalition. He asked them to do the same thing. He asked them to move forward with their work, but to do it with humility and patience. He asked them to remember that they were there to help other species understand things that they could not understand alone, not to prove their superiority but to offer partnership. The responses came back within hours. Human advisors, consultants, and ambassadors across the galaxy agreed. They would continue their work, but they would do it differently. They would listen more than they spoke. They would ask questions before offering answers. They would treat every species they worked with as equals deserving of respect. Over the next few weeks and months, something remarkable began to happen. Species that had been suspicious of human influence started to see that humans were not trying to take power. Humans were trying to share knowledge. Humans were trying to help other beings understand themselves better. Slowly, the resistance began to fade. Slowly, acceptance began to grow. A Zalon commander came to Vincent and said that because of the human advisors working with his troops, his soldiers fought better because they fought with purpose and unity instead of just strength. A Vrex scientist came to Vincent and said that by studying human methods of learning, they had made more scientific breakthroughs in 3 months than they had made in the previous 5 years. A Kreth leader came to Vincent and said that by learning human approaches to problem-solving, the Kreth had been able to form peaceful trade agreements with their ancient enemies. The power that humans had gained was real, but it was not the kind of power that other species had feared. It was not military power or technological power. It was the power to help others become better versions of themselves. It was the power of understanding. It was the power of connection. Vincent stood once again at his window and looked out over the city of Viridian Prime. He thought about the Snarl beast, no longer snarling, no longer alone. He thought about Marcus, who had changed the course of galactic history not through weapons or force, but through compassion and presence. He thought about all the humans who were now working across the galaxy, helping other species learn that there was a different way to approach problems, a different way to live together. The shift had begun. The galaxy was changing, and it had all started with one human cadet and one deadly beast in an arena on a desert planet called Cordus Prime. The alarms began to sound almost immediately. In the observation tower, emergency protocols were activated as officials realized what was happening below them. The Snarl beast had never shown submission before. It had never bowed to anyone. The automatic response was to assume something had gone wrong. Perhaps the creature was sick. Perhaps it was a malfunction in the arena itself. Perhaps there was some kind of deception happening that they could not yet understand. But Vincent knew better. He remained perfectly still, watching the scene unfold below. Marcus's hand rested gently on the Snarl beast's head. The creature was not moving. It was not attacking. It was simply existing in this moment, acknowledging the human in a way that no one had ever expected possible. Medical teams rushed toward the arena, carrying emergency equipment. Guards moved into position, weapons ready, prepared to intervene if the situation changed. The Zalon general rose from his seat and began demanding answers in a voice that carried authority and confusion in equal measure. The Vrex scientist was still recording, his instruments going crazy as they tried to measure something that defied all previous data and expectations. Commander Norton pressed a communication button on her console. Her voice was steady even though her hands shook slightly. All personnel stand down. Maintain your positions but do not enter the arena. We are witnessing something unprecedented. Hold your positions. The activity in the observation tower paused for just a moment as everyone processed her command. Then slowly, reluctantly, the teams began to stop their frantic movements. They maintained their readiness, but they did not advance. They waited. Marcus remained in the arena with the Snarl beast. The sun was rising higher now, casting longer shadows across the sand. The beast's black scales reflected the light, making the creature look almost beautiful in a way that no one had ever considered before. For years, the creature had been viewed only as a weapon, only as a test, only as an obstacle to be overcome. Now in this moment, it was something else. It was a being that had chosen recognition over violence. The beast made that strange sound again, the one that was not quite a roar and not quite a purr. It was a vocalization that seemed to come from somewhere deep within the creature, from some place that had perhaps never been expressed before. Marcus continued to stand beside it, his hand still touching the creature's head, his presence calm and steady. "We need to understand what happened," the Vrex scientist said, moving closer to Vincent. The Vrex were tall, their bodies almost translucent, their eyes large and intelligent. They were among the most advanced species in the galaxy when it came to science and technology. There is nothing in our data that explains this behavior. The Snarl beast has been observed for decades. It has never displayed submission to any creature except its own mate during specific reproductive cycles. Vincent turned to look at the scientist. "What you are asking is how a human managed to do something that your advanced technology and your superior intellect could not accomplish. You are asking how something that should not be possible became possible." "Yes," the Vrex scientist said without hesitation. "That is precisely what I am asking. Because humans do not operate on the same principles that your species does," Vincent said. "You were designed, engineered, created to be superior in intellect. You can understand complex systems and technology, but you do not understand connection in the way that humans do. Humans evolved for millions of years learning to understand other creatures. They learned to live with animals, to work with them, to create bonds with them. This is not technology. This is not intelligence in the way you measure it. This is something different. The Zalon general approached Vincent from his other side. He was massive, his body covered in muscle, his presence commanding. "This is unacceptable," the general said. "My cadet died in this arena. Many cadets have died here. And now we discover that the beast can be controlled? That it can be made to submit? This changes everything about this academy. This changes everything about how we train soldiers." "Yes," Vincent agreed. "It does change everything." Below them in the arena, Marcus finally stepped back from the snarl beast. He moved slowly, giving the creature space, never turning his back to it, never showing fear or aggression. The beast watched him move but did not follow. It simply remained where it was, its head still lowered slightly, its breathing slow and calm. Marcus walked toward the center of the arena where there was a communication system. He pressed the button that connected to the observation tower. "Sir," he said, his voice coming through the speakers, "I believe the trial is complete. The beast and I have reached an understanding." There was silence in the observation tower for several long seconds. Then Commander Norton moved forward. She pressed her own communication button. "Cadet Marcus, please exit the arena slowly and carefully." "Well done." As Marcus walked toward the arena exit, the snarl beast did something that made everyone in the observation tower catch their breath. The creature turned to watch him leave. It watched him walk all the way to the gate, and only when Marcus had completely exited the arena did the beast lie down on the sand, its body relaxing completely, its posture one of rest and contentment rather than aggression or preparation. The Kreth ambassador, who had remained silent until this moment, finally spoke. "The implications of this are enormous. If the beast can be controlled this way, then perhaps we have been misunderstanding the nature of dominance itself. Perhaps we have been confusing control with something else entirely." Medical teams moved forward to check on Marcus as he exited the arena. His vital signs were completely normal. His heart rate was elevated but not dangerously so. He showed no signs of injury or trauma. He walked calmly, almost peacefully, as if he had just completed a simple task rather than something that had been considered impossible. Vincent left the observation tower and made his way down to meet Marcus. By the time he arrived, Marcus was surrounded by medical personnel and academy officials. Everyone wanted to know how he had done it. Everyone wanted to understand what had happened in that arena. Vincent waited until the doctors had completed their examination and cleared Marcus. Then he approached the young human cadet. "What were you thinking in there?" Vincent asked quietly. Marcus looked at him with calm, clear eyes. "I was thinking about a horse I knew when I was young," Marcus said. "It had been abused. It was angry and dangerous. Everyone said to stay away from it. But I did not see an angry animal. I saw a creature that had been hurt and needed to know that it was safe. I spent time with it. I spoke to it softly. I showed it respect and kindness. Eventually it calmed down. Eventually it understood that it did not need to be afraid." "And you thought the snarl beast was the same?" Vincent asked. "I thought that no creature is born wanting to hurt others," Marcus said. "It becomes that way because it has learned to be afraid or to be aggressive. I thought that if I could show the beast that it did not need to be those things, if I could make it understand that it was valued, then maybe it could be something different." Vincent nodded slowly. This was wisdom that came from a different kind of knowledge than what was taught in military academies. This was wisdom that came from understanding life itself, from understanding the connections between all living things. "You have changed the academy today, Cadet," Vincent said. "You have changed something much larger than just this test." As they spoke in the arena, the snarl beast lay peacefully on the sand, no longer snarling, no longer afraid, no longer alone. The sun had not yet risen when Marcus arrived at the arena. The sky above Quartus Prime was still dark, filled with stars that looked like tiny fires burning in the void. The temperature was cold at this hour, and Marcus could see his breath in front of his face. He wore the standard white cadet uniform, no weapons, no armor, nothing to protect him except his own body and his own mind. The guards at the arena entrance looked at him with expressions that were difficult to read. They had seen many cadets come to face the Snarl beast. Most of them had been much larger than this human. Most of them had arrived with confidence or arrogance. This one simply looked calm. He looked like a man walking to meet something important, not something that would kill him. Captain Vincent Hayes stood in the observation tower with Commander Norton and several high-ranking military officials from other species. A Zalon general was there, observing to ensure the Academy was treating his people fairly. A Vrek scientist was recording the trial, measuring everything. A Kreth ambassador stood with her arms folded, her armor reflecting the emergency lights of the arena. They all turned to watch as Marcus entered the sand-covered ground below them. The beast was released. The Snarl beast emerged from its holding chamber like a nightmare made flesh. Its scales caught the first rays of sunlight just beginning to appear on the horizon. It was every bit as massive and terrifying as the records had described. The creature stretched its body, testing its muscles after the night of confinement, its eyes fixed on Marcus immediately. The beast knew what this was. It had done this many times before. This was the time when food came to the arena. This was the time when the creature fed. The beast began to move slowly toward Marcus. It did not rush. It did not seem afraid of this small human. Why would it be afraid? The creature had never lost. It had never been injured by any cadet who had entered this arena. It moved with the confidence of something that had conquered everything it had ever faced. Marcus did not run. This was the moment that made everyone in the observation tower lean forward. Every species watching had expected the human to run. They had seen fear before in countless cadets. They had watched soldiers flee when they realized that no amount of training could save them. But Marcus stood where he was and simply waited. The Snarl beast quickened its pace. It was no longer cautious. The creature could smell the human now, could sense the life force before it. It opened its massive mouth, revealing teeth like white daggers. It released a roar that shook the entire arena. The sound was so loud that several monitors in the observation tower flickered and went offline for just a moment. The roar was supposed to break courage. It was supposed to make prey submit before the hunt even truly began. Marcus did not flinch. The beast charged. It covered the distance across the sand in massive strides. It was running at full speed now, ready to tear into this human with all the force of its considerable body. Everyone in the observation tower held their breath. The Zalon general began taking notes. The Vrek scientist was recording everything. Commander Norton's hands had clenched into fists. Marcus took a single step to the side. It was a small movement, almost casual, but it was perfectly timed. As the Snarl beast lunged with its claws extended, Marcus moved his body out of the way. He did not fight the creature's momentum. Instead, he placed his hand firmly on the beast's neck and moved with it, guiding the creature's own force past his body. The beast's claws raked through empty air. The creature's teeth snapped down on nothing but sand. The Snarl beast stumbled. For the first time in the history of the Academy, the beast had been confused. It was not used to prey that did not run or fight back. It was not accustomed to anything other than direct confrontation. The beast turned quickly, recovering from its stumble, and prepared to attack again. But Marcus was not trying to hurt it. He was not even trying to defend himself in the traditional sense. He was speaking to it. Marcus's voice was low and steady. He did not shout. He did not use the aggressive tones that military personnel usually used when giving commands. Instead, he spoke to the Snarl beast as if he was speaking to a conscious being, an intelligence that deserved respect and acknowledgement. "I see you," Marcus said simply. "I see your strength. I see that you have survived things that would have killed ordinary creatures. I see that you are not just a weapon. You are something more." The words meant nothing to the beast in any literal sense. The creature's brain was not wired to understand human language in that way, but something in the tone carried meaning. The Snarl beast circled Marcus slowly now, its initial rage beginning to shift into something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Confusion, certainly. "You have spent your whole life being feared," Marcus continued, his voice never rising, never showing any sign of the fear that a human should have felt in this situation. "Every cadet that enters this arena sees you as something to be conquered or something to run from. But I see you differently. I see you as a being that deserves to be recognized for what you truly are." The creature circled a second time. Its tail, which had been held high and rigid, began to lower slightly. The beast's breathing slowed from the frantic pace of the attack to something more controlled. Vincent, watching from above, understood what was happening. This was not something that could be taught in any military academy. This was not a technique or a skill that could be learned from books or from training programs. This was something that came from somewhere deeper. This was the ability to see something other than threat in front of you. This was the ability to make another being feel valued and understood. The snarl beast made a sound that was not quite a roar and not quite a purr. It was a sound that had never been heard in the academy before. The creature approached Marcus slowly, and instead of attacking, it lowered its massive head. It was not an aggressive posture. It was something that the ancient scholars had read about in old texts but never actually witnessed. The snarl beast was bowing. In the observation tower, there was complete silence. No one moved. No one spoke. The Zalan general's expression had shifted to complete shock. The Vrek scientist was frantically checking his instruments, wondering if there was a malfunction. The Kreth ambassador's eyes had widened slightly, a sign of surprise that showed through her hardened exterior. Commander Norton turned to Captain Vincent. Her face was pale. "What is happening?" she whispered. Vincent did not answer immediately. He simply watched as Marcus reached out and placed his hand gently on the snarl beast's lowered head. The creature trembled slightly but did not move away. Instead, it seemed to be accepting the touch, accepting the recognition that this human was offering. "Something that changes everything," Vincent finally said. The Galactic Military Academy stood on the harsh planet Cordis Prime like a monument to fear and steel. The massive training grounds stretched across red desert sand and black volcanic rock. Every day, cadets from 1,000 different species arrived here to prove themselves worthy of galactic service. They came from worlds rich with wealth and technology, from ancient civilizations that had mastered space travel before Earth even discovered electricity. They came with confidence and pride. They came to be broken and rebuilt as soldiers. Captain Vincent Hayes watched the sun set over the distant mountains from his observation tower. He had served at the academy for 15 years, and in that time, he had seen every kind of cadet fail the same test. His job was to prepare them, but more importantly, his job was to watch them confront the thing that scared them most. Not death itself, but the fear that they were not enough. That their strength, their speed, their intelligence, their armor, and their weapons would all prove useless against a force of pure animal rage. That force had a name. The snarl beast. The creature was kept in a specialized arena at the south end of the academy grounds. It stood 12 feet tall when it reared up on its hind legs. Its scales were black as the deepest space, smooth as polished obsidian but sharper than any blade. Its claws could tear through reinforced military armor. Its teeth could bite through bone and steel alike. Its roar was legendary. Soldiers from every corner of the galaxy who had heard that roar swore it could shatter your spine, just from the sound waves alone. The beast had never bowed to any cadet, not a single one in the entire history of the academy. Vincent reviewed the day's results as he stood at the window. 5 cadets had faced the beast today. 5 cadets had been carried away by medical teams. A Zalan cadet, genetically engineered for superhuman strength, had lasted exactly 47 seconds before the beast's teeth found his neck. A Vrex cadet, whose species possessed advanced intelligence and could operate complex technology with their minds alone, had tried to use mind control. The beast had no brain to control in that way. It was pure instinct and hunger. A Kreth cadet, whose body was covered in armor-like skin and whose species had conquered 17 planets through military might alone, had fought back with everything he had. The snarl beast had simply been stronger, faster, and more vicious. 3 humans had also attempted the trial this year. The first 2 had not lasted more than 20 seconds each. Humans were smaller than most galactic species. They were physically weaker. They had no natural armor, no claws, no exoskeletons, no energy weapons implanted in their bodies. By every measurable standard, humans should have been eliminated from this academy long ago. But they kept coming back. They kept trying. Vincent had noticed this about humanity. They failed and returned. They were broken and rebuilt themselves. They seemed to understand something that the other species had not yet grasped. The Academy Administrator, Commander Sarah Norton, found Vincent in the tower as the light faded from the sky. She was a tall woman from a planet called Viridian Prime, whose people had ruled their star system for over 10,000 years. She climbed the stairs slowly, her breathing steady and controlled. "The Zalon General is demanding answers," she said without greeting. "His cadet was killed today. He wants to know if the beast is being maintained properly, if it is being fed, if it is being treated fairly. He seems to believe that his soldier was not defeated by the creature. He seems to believe it was a malfunction in the test." Vincent did not turn from the window. He had heard these complaints before. When superior species failed against the beast, they always looked for external reasons. Rarely did they accept that the creature had simply been superior in that moment. "The beast is functioning as designed," Vincent said quietly. "It has not eaten in 3 days. It is well within its normal parameters." The Zalon cadet underestimated what he faced. That was his error, not the Academy's. Commander Norton moved to stand beside Vincent. They looked out over the Academy grounds together. In the distance, they could see the arena. The sand inside was still dark with stains that would not wash away. "There is another human cadet," Norton said. "Marcus Chen. He is scheduled to face the beast tomorrow at dawn. The records show he has no military background. His family is not even part of an elite human colony. He comes from a place called Montana on Earth. They grow things there, Norton tells me. They raise animals. He has no combat training to speak of." Vincent finally turned to look at the commander. A small smile appeared on his face, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who understood something that others did not. "Let him face the beast," Vincent said. "He will die," Norton said flatly, "and then the human ambassador will demand answers. They will claim the Academy is unfairly assigning the larger, more dangerous trials to humans. They will say we are trying to eliminate their species from the program. I would rather avoid this political problem. If we stop the trial because he might die, then we admit that we know the outcome in advance," Vincent said. "We admit that some species are destined to fail. I do not believe that is true, and neither do you, or you would not have asked me about this cadet specifically. You would have simply canceled his trial." Commander Norton was quiet for a long moment. The red sun sank lower on the horizon. Stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the Academy compound, thousands of cadets from every species imaginable prepared for sleep, and one human cadet from Montana prepared to face something that had never shown mercy. Never learned to hesitate and never bowed to anyone. "What do you think will happen?" Norton asked finally. Vincent returned his gaze to the distant arena. The floodlights were beginning to come on as darkness fell across Cordus Prime. In the arena, guards were moving around, making sure the barriers were secure, making sure there was no way for the beast to escape. They did this every night, whether the beast would be used the next day or not. "I think," Vincent said slowly, "we are about to see something we have never seen before." Tomorrow morning, the sun would rise over Cordus Prime. Marcus from Montana would walk into that arena. The snarl beast would roar, and something would change. Vincent was certain of this. He could not explain why. He could not point to any logical reason for his certainty, but he had spent 15 years watching cadets from every advanced species in the galaxy fail against the same opponent. He had learned to notice when something was different. He had learned to recognize when something unexpected was about to happen, and Marcus Chen was different.